Democratic ticket in the Democratic primary. Now, there are Republicans, and they're always a Republican that they put up, but they maybe will get 2% of the vote. So to go back to 2009, when I ran the first time, again, I was expecting to run for an open seat, and I ran right up against the establishment, right? And I made a strategic decision, and I'm not sure, you know, right, wrong, I don't know, but it was the first race I ever ran. It was like something I had not anticipated, but I found that running a really principled race, staying totally focused on the issues, like what you said, I just connected with my community, I focused on solutions, I wasn't afraid to challenge the establishment. You call it the Democratic Party, I call it the establishment. And honestly, this time around, we will have the endorsements of several Democratic parties, some of the elected officials, and I have continued to unapologetically be myself and be completely committed to my community. And so I don't know what will happen come next year, but I think that the way that we address that, and I'd be interested to hear what others have to say, is stay focused on your principle, don't let yourself react to them, and don't assume that they aren't you. And you'd be surprised. I have been surprised seeing the inroads that I make and seeing the knee-jerk reactions. You know, people get upset if you run against them. Come on, it's you know, this is democracy, right?
For the position, not against anyone.
Right, right. I mean, that was what I did in 2009. So it'll be interesting to see what happens in 2013. Again, because we did so well, we also have an opportunity to be able to run on a very progressive line, but still at the end of the day, we do have to identify voters, take it as a serious campaign, be able to be there on a host of issues, find a way to connect and identify with all of my voters, right? This is one of the conversations we had in preparation for this, which was like, am I representing my interests or am I representing my community? And ultimately, my job as an elected official is to represent my community, hopefully impacting it.
I think what's funny about this too, and combining kind of points that have been made already, is Occupy Wall Street has obviously been fighting the establishment in a similar way, and to Adam's point earlier about how directly local officials have impacted occupations. It was something, Adam, I don't know if you remember, but we were with Justin Krebs right after an ODS Drinking Liberally, and it was early enough on in the occupation when Mayor Bloomberg was first really starting to kind of put pressure on us in this way, where we had noticed that all of a sudden, just so happened at 7 p.m., right when the General Assembly would start, there was just jackhammering that would begin. Just like from some construction project that none of us had any idea about, but just all of a sudden there'd be jackhammering that would begin right when there was a mic check. And it was like one of those moments where you really see how clearly a member of the Democratic Party, or not a member of the Democratic Party, but how political officials can corrupt their office just in the most blatant, brazen way. And throughout OWS, we've seen this everywhere you can, from arresting 700 people on a bridge to the brutality. And I feel like Yetta is in a particularly powerful position in terms of this perspective on what especially Democratic Party members should not be doing, because she was one of the people that would get occupiers out of jail. These people that were illegally arrested because of an effort of 1% to use the police as their private army to suppress the movement. And that's something that I feel like when people learn about, when they hear about, it resonates. And even if it's something that doesn't resonate with the Democratic establishment, I'm confident that members of our district, proud to be a would-be constituent of Yetta's, are going to recognize that this is something that shouldn't happen, especially since so many examples of these illegal arrests and brutality occurred blocks away from them.
I just want to piggyback on that also, which is that as a result of that, I ended up being the attorney representing several elected officials who they themselves had been wrongfully arrested. So,
sometimes local officials get involved.
Right. And I know we're going to hear, I do want to bring it to Occupy Sandy and some of the relief efforts around Sandy, because I think that also brings home the fact that like the Occupy movement has worked with the FEMA folks and the U.S. Marines to train them on how to deal with, distribution and community and response. So the idea that there's opposition, I mean, we want to name it. We want to name it and acknowledge when bullying or when smear campaigns happen. But I think we would do it in a way that's empowered. We actually can, like when people have tried to do smear campaigns against me in my district, it actually upsets my community, and they get more pushback in some ways. So like, you gotta acknowledge it, but then you find strategic ways where you can find commonality.
I just wanted to give Amy a quick chance to.
Yeah, I just want to say that the occupier in me is listening to all the wonderful. I completely agree with everything that's been said about how wonderful it will be to have someone like at in an elected position. But at the same time, I think it's really important that it's not seen that we need an elected official to come in and make Occupy elevated or something like that. Like that just is off. And I think the great thing about Yetta is that she is aware of that tension and that possibility of it being viewed that way, and has people around her that see that too. And like everything in Occupy, we're just exploring, and it's always changing, and it's always something new to discover. And so that's what this process is. But I do hear some of the well, okay, it would be great to have a person on the city council that could stop the jackhammers or something like that. I don't think so, but and that's
How have we not already had that?
Great.
I mean, we've already had that.
No.
and Jemani. I mean, they're not. I
Yeah.
don't see
another one,
Another one. Okay.
another one, yeah,
100 more.
Yeah.
In state senate.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
every
yeah, that's
class of
what,
government.
yeah.
yeah.
And so I wanted Occupy, Sandy had, I'm sorry, just stop up.
Yeah,
Sorry,
I'm
hi. Hi, Andy.
I've done a lot of Occupy Wall Street. Yourself. And it's an affection title from the park, but it's nice as well. I helped get Occupy Sandy off the ground like a month ago, and it's kind of succeeded beyond my wildest dreams. But actually, I know y'all want me to talk, maybe want me to talk about that. I don't exactly want to talk about that for one moment. Because I've had a lot of thoughts about what an Occupy candidate is, and I think that there's varying degrees of what that could be and what it couldn't be. I think, and I've come to we think about that sort of thing a lot. And one of the things is okay, so city council, that's a mark that's good for me, because anything in Congress or Senate or something at that level that started to really be I'm Occupy and use it, I would be very skeptical and wary and freaked out. And the next thing, and I think one of the things that I came to is if I'm doing my best to organize direct democracy stuff, real politics in public kind of shit, it seems some sort of way that your constituency can literally see the decisions you're making on a day-to-day basis and have a literal vote or say in those decisions, to the point where if you thought, if they had an opinion, a majority opinion that went against your opinion, that you would be okay, y'all are right, you're the constituency, and I'm your representative, your spokesperson. If there was an actual structure, and you actually said that I, Yetta Curlin, am literally going to defer my individual opinion to my constituency, that's a radical idea. That's a fucking crazy ass idea. And if you put that as a running campaign, that I am not running as Yetta Curlin, I am running as this 25-person selected council behind me, that's the kind of shit I want to see in city council in the future. And that's actually democratizing things, in my opinion. So I don't know.
So I
know that's kind of crazy.
No. It's we've been talking a lot about direct democracy and how new media can impact campaigns and candidacies, and what you've talked about are kind of the failures of what previous government officials have done. They haven't deferred. They haven't been listening,
They
right?
didn't have a system, though. It's not their fault. There was no established system. It's a structure that I'm talking about, a very
Right.
concrete structure.
So I think that I want to open up a dialogue about how do you use new media in a campaign and in a candidacy to kind of open up that dialogue and create a system that exists. I mean, Adam, you know how you communicate with 50,000 people or 1 million people, and you explain, and they kind of have input and ownership over their candidate. Well, this is kind of not just a direct route, but a two-way street that we're looking for and asking for. How would that look in new media? And then maybe how would that play out after a campaign into the candidacy?
Well, you heard it here first. Friendster. It's all about Friendster. That's not true. So, I mean, I think one opportunity that Occupy actually failed miserably on, frankly, is online organizing. And thank you. There was, at high energy moments, there was, I think, a burden on those who want to do smart organizing to attempt to capture a little bit of energy and, keep tabs, keep lines of communication with the people who are there for the high energy moment, to re-engage them in the fight. Email is still pretty much, king for that. And Occupy didn't really appear to have any kind of email list or program, and if they had a list, they didn't have a program. Occupy DC had no program. It was just sad, such that 6 months down the road, or 3 months down the road, when there was about to be an encampment busted by police, we couldn't say, hey, everybody, quick, come down, because there was no mechanism to do that.
Yeah.
So how do you apply that lesson to a candidacy? Well, have an email list. But I think one step beyond that is, I'm a big fan of candidates who kind of, essentially say, watch what I do, not what I say. I'm not just promising to be awesome, I'm awesome in real time. I think Yeta's work with Occupy Sandy is actually a good example of that, and hopefully there'll be more to come. But I think kind of real-time, candidate-centric issue campaigning, where the candidate is using the bully pulpit of their candidacy to move the ball forward, and kind of pick a fight and have people rally around that fight and keep those people on your team, is kind of the key approach to take. That's the strategy. The tactic includes email and Facebook and Twitter and all that. But I think that of all people, Yeta actually has a proven track record of doing that already, and I would encourage that to kind of be an ethos of the campaign.
So I know that in New York we have text messaging, emailing, and Facebooking, and that all goes on with Occupy Sandy and Occupy in general. And maybe you want to speak to that a little bit, Winnie?
Yeah, I was gonna
Okay,
say
so
that.
I disagree.
We'll go Winnie and Harry.
I very
because
respectfully
I know there's some
disagree.
burning.
I don't think that's true at all. I think that Occupy's greatest strength has actually been in utilizing social media to not only put that messaging out there, but to make it sexy globally. Forget about America. Let's talk about Indonesia, and let's talk about the whole wide world.
Isn't that different though than organizing though? I hear what you're saying.
Yeah.
I love both what you guys said,
Sure, I mean, we use it for organizing too. There's been plenty of amazing actions. I mean, how do you think these actions happen? I mean, there's, getting people to Walmart, getting people to Union Square, getting people to Times Square, getting people to do all these things, strike. I mean, there's, we do use it for organizing. I mean, I just think it's different.
I think, were you talking about at the beginning more so than now? I think now it's much better. I mean, the email list and now it's become, I think the social media has become the tool, has become a way that we've organized, but I think that there was a lot of missed opportunity in the first 3 months to really gather,
Sure.
There's no structure.
There was no structure.
We had no idea what would happen.
There was no
That's
structure.
true.
We've, in the last year and 2 months, we have done some pretty crazy things. I
Definitely.
think, and and everyone can take ownership for them, and I think that's the difference. It's not single issue. It's never been single issue. It's also about bringing all these different people together, and getting behind whatever issue you want to get behind. I mean, I just think it's just a very sort of I think it's short-sighted to think that Occupy hasn't used media effectively, because the reason why we're still here and scrutinized in some cases or loved, beloved even in some cases, I don't know, depending on who you are in the room. We're still here because we have a very sort of bold media presence. How Occupy Sandy got off the ground to recruit 60,000 volunteers over the course of a 2-week period was because of Facebook, was because of Inter-Occupy. I mean, these were 60,000 citizens of the 5 boroughs who said, you know what, I want to go to a church, and there were 2, 3, 4 groups all working together. Andy was in the church, I was online. I mean, there was a lot of that happening, and now, now we're heroes.
I just also want to remind us that it's definitely one thing to put out data and to organize, but what we're talking about is having a 2-way road for a candidate. So while it's issue oriented. This will be, I mean, obviously not single issue oriented, multiple issue oriented, but sort of a dialogue, a GA, a media GA, or I don't know what it looks like. I mean, I'm asking you.
Well, we don't control the messaging, right? So we don't really believe in censorship, so that's number one. That's a very important point. We're not controlling the messaging. We're not like, so I think
But a candidate would, or
a traditional, I think a traditional candidate would control their messaging. Both conservative candidates and progressive candidates, you control your messaging. We don't really do that at Occupy. We don't censor our I mean, anyone is able to occupy. Anyone is able to say they're an occupier. Anyone is able to post a Facebook, a status update and say, I'm an occupier, and then just go on and on about like whatever they want to go on about. Ron Paul, sure. Anarchism, sure. Homesteading, go for it. So that's the difference, like between like Occupy.
I mean, I think the difference between Occupy and electoral politics is something Andy mentioned, which is like, I guess in a vacuum it would be awesome to be able to caucus with your entire, and not even 25 people, it would have to be the 150,000 people who you represent, or would it be the 20,000 people who voted for you, or whatever it was. I think conversely in electoral politics, when you have somebody representing a group, the idea is you put forward yourself. You say, this is where I stand on the issues, is my positions. If you support that, and that's kind of, I think, one of the fundamental differences. I don't know if in real time, it might be so process heavy that it would be impossible to actually achieve. Although I like the idea of, I believe in shared authority. I believe in participatory politics. So
maybe as small as like an email of your days,
right.
Sort of things that you hit like no or yes. But yeah, it's process heavy.
I just want to make one more point.
I got you, Charles.
To Charles and I think Adam.
Yeah. 1, 2.
Like the people who will be voting in the next 20 years, they're millennials. They don't use email. I mean, they just don't. Millennials are engaged with social media, and that's the truth. So I mean, listen. In my day job, I have a video startup, and we use email. We have huge lists. We do, we use email, but we've found that email is not as successful. I mean, I know that 8 million people are still glued to their email, who are on the New York Times list or whatever. But as we're moving forward, social media is really going to change everything. So I think that's really something to understand, like millennial engagement with social media. And this is like not TED Talk, but this is a different thing. So
the analytics you get from that help you understand, I think.
Right.
So 1, 2, and then 3, and then Charles on that. Okay?
I have a question that really focuses on process and the process of running in New York City, because I think it's something that we haven't really touched on. And the fact that, in many ways, New York City is very, very far from what we would all recognize as a democracy. For many people in this room that may not know, we have closed primaries in New York City, and the people who vote in these closed primaries are what and I've worked in New York City politics, are what we would refer to as old school Democrats. And you're, as a candidate for city council, you're going to have to, talk to a lot of district leaders and a lot of community board members, and these are like the opinion leaders that really control who votes and really sway the electorate in your district. And I think that process is so counterintuitive to what Occupy stands for as a movement, and you're going to have to do it if you want to get elected, right? And you're going to need volunteers to work a voter file for you, right, and make calls and collect petition signatures. What are some of these Occupy folks going to do when you come and you say, please come volunteer on my campaign and help me, sway these district leaders who really hold the reins of power in my city council district?
I know a lot of us are anxious to respond, so I'll just say very quickly. Here's what's really exciting about the work that has been happening pre-Occupy, Occupy, outside of Occupy, in terms of progressive movements, is that one of the district leaders in my district who's already endorsed me was arrested during Occupy and is a client of mine. And one of the district leaders who has already endorsed me was run by a group of us very progressive people, and she ousted a kind of Tammany Hall, old school district leader. So there is some really tremendous change. There's an incredible opportunity. I'm not saying it's going to be easy, but I'm saying for me personally, like I said, I'm not interested in just the politics of politics.
Yeah.
I'm interested in doing those kind of exciting things. It reminds me of like the creative response of Occupy, you know, like you put 4 wheels on a board and suddenly it becomes a skateboard and you can like do a little trick here and then before you know it, you're doing incredible things. So there's some exciting stuff already happening as well. I'll let
Okay, so I want to give us all the 5-minute warning. What I want to do is, in order to facilitate that and make that happen, I'm going to hear all the burning questions, and we're going to try and hit it all in the last 5 minutes. It can happen. I believe it, so do you. Here we go. One, I love Van, and then I got this, I got this. I hear Charles in the back, too.
Would it be anti-Occupy for you to join the Democratic Club?
I belong to several.
Hold on, we're not answering, we're listening to them all. Then we got Fury. Go ahead.
I was just wondering, a lot of us here at this conference are, by some definitions, in some way, part of like the establishment somehow. And, you know, we have to deal with people who kind of like get it or don't get it, or maybe kind of get it or want to get it but keep it a secret. So like, how is someone like working within that structure, how do you kind of create that space and create a dialogue with people who are a little more Occupy-phobic?
Okay.
Whether it's a board or well,
I think that's great.
This was just a resource to share when you mentioned Stop and Frisk. At the Washington Post Hackathon, someone developed a Stop and Frisk API, and I thought folks in this room might be interested to know that.
It's a great point of information, Mike.
I was just going to say, I feel like some of the differences here are a result of the absence in American life of real political parties, the kind you have in Latin America and Europe. And one of the good things about real political parties, and I don't mean Democrats, and I also don't mean Spartacists, I mean like a culture in which customer service is actually an important component, and making sure that the voices of the loudest aren't the ones that predominate, and making sure that there's enough structure in order to provide follow-up for whatever the initiatives are, even after media attention has died down. And those are areas where Occupy has a weakness and where political candidates actually need those strengths. So I wonder if when Andy's talking about some sort of Council 25, or when you're talking about, you know, having one kind of constituency do outreach to another, if you're not sort of figuring out in New York City what it means for there to be a quasi-political party structure, whether it's formalized or not, that serves those functions and is able to survive in between elections and in between those moments of peak performance. And I think one of the challenges is that in New York City, it's really hard to carve out that kind of a role because of all the forces that want you to not have it.
Okay, so what I want to say is I'm going to give every panelist 30 more seconds, but the conversation is never over. Please turn to Twitter and keep on with the hashtag A Better City is Possible, at Yetta Curlin, hashtag Yetta2013, and everybody try and sum it up, wrap it up in 30 seconds. Harry, hit it.
Well, I just want to say I'm extremely excited about Yetta's candidacy, and I feel like it's really a moment for where we, in the last, recently with Occupy Sandy and the Strike Debt Rolling Jubilee, Occupy has evolved in some really exciting ways. And I think this is going to be a great test case to see if how Occupy can relate to a candidacy, even though it's something that's not specifically an Occupy candidacy, but just recognizing our impact on the electoral sphere.
You know, with my work with Occupy Sandy, I've come up against a lot of bureaucracy, and there hasn't been a whole lot of support from the government. So I think that moving forward, as we experience more and more climate change-induced funky weather, it's important for us to have like elected officials who are going to make decisions for the public, or help or work with the public to restore, you know, restore the power, if you will. And I think that Yetta is a candidate who really understands that and who can see the bigger picture. And that's why I'm here today, because it's been a very frustrating process.
I wanted to address what that question was. I do anticipate that there will be some negativity around the idea of Occupy among certain people, you know, even in this district. But I think what Yetta has been doing long before Occupy and will continue doing after is really demonstrating the ideals of Occupy, which are in line with what the people in the district want, and that just by like doing rather than talking about it, they're going to become more and more comfortable with it. But I'm also just curious to see what the reaction will be, because like we've been talking the preparation to this, yet it can't not be associated with Occupy in some way she wouldn't want to, and there'd be no reason to be. So it's there, and so we're going to see what happens.
It's great. I am sorry that we didn't get to talk more about Occupy Sandy relief efforts, because I do think that the things that we're talking about in terms of principle-centered leadership and restoring integrity and public service in the public sphere goes to the core of what we're trying to deal with right now in the Far Rockaways, dealing with disaster capitalism and opportunities for growth that should be empowering, that could be very helpful for all of us. But we'll keep doing exactly what we're doing, and hopefully we'll have chances to talk and work together in the future.
So I guess I would just say that when thinking about how Occupy and an electoral campaign merge, it's important just to be honest and say that Occupy is not the gold standard in horizontal organizing. It was an attempt, and multiple encampments had different rules and different practices, and they're all different attempts. I think that in some cases, among those who purported to represent 99%, 1% of 99%ers sometimes made the rest of the 99% look really bad. And when thinking about the horizontal nature of a campaign electorally, I think it's important to just kind of be a little bit self-questioning of some of those practices and be willing to evolve, which is a word that was used before. The one forward-looking note I would say is that the ethos of the Occupy movement is bottom-up. The ethos is regular people can make a difference. And what we saw with Howard Dean's campaign for party chair is that these crusty old bosses, for the first time ever, had people calling them and emailing them. Facebook wasn't around yet. And that resulted in lots of party people who at first hated Howard Dean having to vote for him because the people were coming out of the woodwork. So I think that's the broad template for how this can actually happen, and the specific rules and rules of how we comply with the ethos of Occupy are secondary to the broader picture of people power.
Awesome. Well, thank you all.